Good morning, everyone. This is Financial Literacy 101. You're live with Ross. And today we're going to get into the conversation about reparations. This conversation is not going to die with the majority of us, and it should not. The conversation about reparations, the fight for reparations, the protest for reparations should not die. Everybody is getting what they are owed. Everybody is getting what essentially they have been fighting for, what they've been protesting for. I don't know if you guys have been aware of the $2.1 billion that New York State is given to undocumented immigrants, aka illegal immigrants, people who are not even citizens of the country. New York State is giving each one of them a check for $15,000. Can I say that again? New York State passed a bill that gives each undocumented worker, each illegal immigrant who's illegal in this country, $15,000 to $20,000 per person. But foundational Black Americans, aka African Americans, descendant of slaves, cannot receive a single dime from the U.S. federal white supremacy system that we call our government. Native Americans, which I never say that they don't deserve what they're being given, but consistently, the federal government continues to give Native Americans additional funding, additional resources under the law with our tax dollars. Even though Native American reservations lands are what? Sovereign land, meaning they operate as their own country, but it's funded by this country, it's funded by your tax dollars. They're giving Native Americans, on top of their $2 billion that they receive every year to run their reservations and casinos and housing and infrastructures on their sovereign land, but they're also giving Native Americans $31 billion. I made this very aware that when Obama and Joe Biden was in the presidency, that Obama gave the Holocaust Jew survivors who are actually living in America $12 million. I can go down a whole list of how the American government just prints out and gives out money to every group of people except foundational Black Americans, descendants of slaves. Now, I know some of you may be aware of the Conyers bill. Now, Representative Conyers introduced this bill, HR 3745, in November of 1989, which is the preamble of the bill declared its purpose. Now, this bill read slightly as such: to acknowledge the fundamental injustice, cruelty, brutality, and inhumanity of slavery in the United States and the 13 American colonies between 1619 and 1865. But if you consider yourself a foundational Black American, you know that actually starts in 1526. And to establish a commission to examine the institution of slavery, subsequent de jure and de facto economic discrimination against foundational Black Americans, and the impact of these forces on living African Americans, to make recommendations to Congress on appropriate remedies and for other purposes. Okay, it's similar to HR 40, but at least they're explaining and calling out through injustice and brutality of what our ancestors went from. Now, this bill failed to make it to the House, but of course. And throughout the years, people have proposed different reparation plans. Some, like Robert Brock, a Los Angeles campaigner reparation, argued for direct payments to descendants of slaves. Again, Robert Brock, a Los Angeles campaigner for reparations, argued for direct payments to descendants of slaves. You know, some people, I had this conversation yesterday. A lot of people, mostly white, do not support reparations for African Americans, even though I continue to make the arguments that Native American descendants, okay, the Native Americans that you see now are descendants of those who the government did great injustice in, who essentially wiped away a huge amount of their population as well as stole their land. But they are still receiving reparations under the law. Their schools, everything that's actually on a reservation is federally funded by your tax dollars. So when people say, well, who's paying for that? I said, well, the U.S. government's paying for it. Well, that's our tax dollars. I said, so why don't you protest against Native Americans? And then they bring up, though, well, you're not a slave. You've never been a slave. Your mother never been a slave. I said, neither has theirs. And then they shut up because they know that it's a futile argument. But the government owes us money on a number of different fronts. for labor, for loss of culture, and of humanity. And we know that some supporters of reparations, like journalist Ron Daniels, proposed government finance of a national fund to develop educational and economic opportunities for the entire Black community. Daniels argued in editorial that Americans must own up to its own responsibility to make a damaged people whole again. I know the whole argument came about yesterday of like, well, what group of Black people do we give? We give African Americans, because essentially if Africans come over to America and they naturalize, they become citizens, and they're African Americans. Do they get it? Do Caribbean people who come over here and get it? No. None of those groups get it except foundational Black Americans, those people who are direct descendants of slavery in America. Now, Africans and Caribbeans, they need to go to Europe for their reparations. And that's fine. You don't see us fighting for reparations in Europe. We have to make sure that you target the group who did the injustice to your people and to you. So this is not about disconnecting or disrupting the African diaspora, but no, you take your reparations up with the party who did the injustice to your people. That's the way it works. Now we need to understand that, such as the National Coalition for Reparations in America, they call it NCOBRA, advocate broader approach. They believe that government could satisfy the call for reparations by a different of means, including land ownership of companies of stock, money, and aircraft. The group also calls for a method of self-government for Black Americans to give them autonomy. See, that's what they gave Native Americans. They gave Native Americans autonomy. They gave Native Americans the ability and monetary payments to star companies, mostly casinos, and which are tax-free. Understand this. Our tax dollars are paying everything that's funded on a reservation for Native Americans and the different tribes that they have. And they do not pay taxes themselves unless they are working outside of the reservation. But now, just as advocates are not unanimous about the form of reparations, neither are they united on the amount. Now, some favor direct payments to slave descendants ranging from $25,000 to $100,000 or more. But if you really do the math of the $14-15 trillion that has been accumulated through the backs of our ancestors of free labor, each foundational Black American is supposed to receive $325,000. Do I believe that we'll ever get that? No, but I'll settle for $100,000. But see, other groups like NCOBRA believe a final amount cannot be determined until more study essentially has been done to determine the harm slavery has caused Blacks. But they suggest a total amount could be in the trillions. Now I know. The big argument for reparations has been going on way too long, especially for Black Americans. And there's a lot of pros and cons to reparations when you come to the fight for it, even the conversation and the argument about it. Some of the things that people come up with, they say, there are no Black slaves living today, and slavery ended more than 200 years ago during the Civil War. And it says unfair to ask American taxpayers, many of them families that came to the United States after slavery ended, to pay for the wrongs of slavery. And then again, I bring up the whole argument with Native Americans. Why is it that no one brings up the situation when Native Americans can sit on their tribal land and their sovereign land and be funded and get monetary payments from the federal government, which is also our tax dollars, also the tax dollars of the descendants of slavery? Could us not paying taxes for the next 300, 600 years be a form of reparation? I call that a start. It won't be solely reparation. That would be a start. But see, the problems faced by African Americans today are not the legacy of slavery or even racism. This is what people say. Many Blacks have succeeded very well in American society, and most of them Blacks operate in what industry? You named it, entertainment. The majority of Black millionaires are not from IT. They're not from business. Okay, they're not from being in the medical field. It's from entertainment, because that what the white community has prompted blacks up to do. We get in where we fit in. Like, okay, they want us to rap, sing, and dance and tell jokes and act, then that's what we'll do to make it. But we have been shunned out. We've been shut out. Any other sector in America. Now, when I look at this, the problems, and here's what they're saying. The problems of the poor African Americans are caused by social ills within the inner city, such as the breakdowns of families and high crimes and dependence on welfare. Okay, who started that? See, everybody is looking at what's going on right now. I love to go to the why, because it's easy to blame the people who are in the situation and predicament that they're in now. But the question I ask is why? Why do majority of Black Americans live in ghettos, projects, and slums? That is because that America instituted the system of ghetto by the way of Hitler. Hitler came up with the ghettos with the Jews, and what they found out that when you stack people on top of each other and beside each other, guess what they do? They absolutely break down. They absolutely start in crime against each other. They kill each other. They steal from one another. The same things that occurs in a lot of our neighborhoods today. It was a social experiment that turned out to be great in the sense of Nazi Germany, the third rank. And then they implemented that on the Black community in America. So they already knew the effects of it. This is the problem that people always want to point to. Well, a lot of you guys on welfare. Well, a lot of you guys got Black on Black crime. And I told this in the place in my cigar lounge yesterday. I say, you guys always pointing out Black on Black crime like Black people are the only people who are committing crimes. I said it's called proximity killings. People kill people who live next to them. People kill people who look like them. In white communities, white people kill white people. In Asian communities, Asian people kill Asian people. Hispanic people, so on and so forth. It's called proximity killings. You kill those who you come in readily contact with. And in the ghettos, projects, and slums, that people, the high crime rate, why there's a high crime rate. Let's get to the why instead of pointing the finger at the people. Oh, well, when we're going to get out the past, when we're going to get out the history. See, if we understand the why, then we understand why Black Americans need, and you give us what's owed, reparations. Because reparation is just not a monetary payment of a check. No, it's funding and resources and a direct payment of a check. It's funding our medical clinics and our hospitals and upgrading our infrastructure and housing and apartments. Not alone, a grant. See, and here's the thing. If you give everybody a direct payment of $100,000 and you increase funding, because you really don't give us funding. Well, I shouldn't even say increase. I should say start funding for Black communities and have our communities to look like everyone else, then that's a start. Okay. Because a lot of us, believe it or not, I talk to a lot of Black Americans. They also don't believe in reparations, or some of them don't believe that it will happen. Okay. I can agree with the people who don't believe that it will happen. But what about those who don't believe we should get it? And most of these people, unfortunately, are non-FBA. They're usually from Africa. They're usually from Caribbean. And I'm not saying all our Caribbean brothers and sisters and African brothers and sisters are against reparation for us. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that a lot of them that speak out, they are against it. So what are some other things that have been saying? They said that the federal and state governments have already spent billions of dollars on social programs such as welfare. But ladies and gentlemen, as I pointed out in the beginning of this, that immigrants are getting billions of dollars. Hispanics have the Initiative Prosperity Act. Everybody, every group is getting some form of reparations or protections under the law. But when it comes to us, they talk about welfare. Welfare is for everyone. There's white people on welfare. There's Asian people on, probably not Asians, but there's Hispanic people on welfare. So Black Americans, and this is what they say, that they had given us social programs such as welfare, subsidized housing, healthcare, employment development, affirmative action, and education. Affirmative action wasn't created for black people; it's created for white females. And some people are like, well, where are you getting this information? How do you just read it? These programs have benefited supposedly black Americans. Now, black Americans, particularly the young, supposedly, this is what they're telling us, need to overcome their problems through their own efforts and not depend on more government handouts and benefits. See, a handout is not something that you actually owe. No one, and I love the only example that I have, which is the strongest example, is Native Americans. No one never tells Native Americans, hey, you guys should stop having the federal government give you guys money. That's just a handout. But see, none of them are the Native Americans that any of the atrocities happened to. But when it comes to us, the one who built this country, the descendants who ancestors built this country, nobody wants to own up to that argument. Nobody wants to even have that argument when you do compare and contrast. Okay, you stole their land, but who built it? Who made this country wealthy? Who made this country powerful? I digress. But then they say reparations are too expensive, depriving the country of opportunity to fix the Social Security and Medicare system and meet other budget needs that benefit all Americans. Any reparation plan will lead to unfairness and huge administrative costs. Then they say, well, who will receive reparations? Descendants of slaves? All blacks? Would well-off black Americans receive payments? Yes. Not all blacks, no. Well-off foundational black Americans, yes. And then they say if a fund was set up, who would administer it? The government, just like they administer money to the Native Americans. Who those unhappy with the plan call for even more reparations? Now, those who advocate for reparations reject the arguments. See, the claim for reparation is not against white Americans, because that's what some white Americans believe. Oh, this is against us. No. It's not against white Americans or even individual Americans. It is a claim against American government and society, which has continued from the time of slavery. As all members of society share in society benefits, they must also share the burdens in the form of taxation. Through slavery, black Americans were terribly wronged and modern blacks were robbed of their inheritance. Us blacks face racism every day. They deserve to be compensated. Most of us have PTSD. Most of us have PTSD. When a police officer gets behind me, my palms start to get sweaty. I get a little bit nervous, even though I haven't committed a crime, even though I have not broken the speed limit. But this is the everyday PTSD that we live in this country. Knowing that you are black and knowing that you live in a system of white supremacy, you should be walking around and saying, this is why the black community can have a lot of mental issues. It's not because we're doing it to ourselves. Now, the problems faced by many blacks today come from slavery and societal ongoing racism. See, we were uprooted from our homes in Africa and brutalized in an American by a system that destroyed the family structure and degraded the individual. See, when slavery ended, black Americans owned nothing, isolated and discriminated against. We were denied education, contacts with society, economic opportunity. Now, compared to whites, blacks remain in a disadvantaged position and will remain so until they receive compensation and society's racism ends. Now, we can't end racism, but there's a lot of things else we can absolutely end. And the first form of that is reparations. The first form of that is reparations. So what people don't understand is back in the day, our ancestors, our great-grandfather, great-grandmother, they did all these things to fit into white America to make it. That's why we have this white inferiority complex and how we try to fit into white America by straightening our hair, by looking like them, like talking like them, aka code switching. See, code switching is a form that Black Americans use to say, hey, I need to fit in to get this job. They're talking about, I say, well, who's the most educated group? Believe it or not, ladies and gentlemen, Black females are the most educated group. And what I mean by educated doesn't mean they're super intelligent, but we know our sisters are, but they mean that they're the ones with the most degrees. But guess what? They're the ones with the most debt. Welfare, subsidized housing, affirmative action, and other previous efforts to address social economic problems of the Black underclass has been too late. Rather, too little and too late. They fail because society has failed to come to grips with the central problem, its own racism and discrimination and implicit biases. Now, in some cases, social programs, though well-intentioned, actually increase Black isolation and further degrade the Black community. In addition, these programs benefit other groups, not just Blacks. So anytime they say they're giving something to Black people, just like Kamala Harris said, I'm not going to do nothing just for Black people. Whatever I do will fund and support all of society, all of America. Now, by doing so, the government failed to address unique claims based on slavery that foundational Black Americans have. I mean, reparations will not promote dependency. See, they think reparations is just another welfare system. No, it isn't. You get that damn EBT card and you only can go shop certain places. I can't go buy a business with the EBT card. I can't go buy real estate with an EBT card. I can't go buy a 3D printer to create an invention with an EBT card. So stop thinking that welfare is reparations. If someone tells you that welfare system is reparation for Black people, slap the shit out of them. No, don't do that. Don't go to jail. My bad. I digress. But see, what we need is individual payments to Black Americans and the community as a whole to create a chance to increase our own economic base and our own self-reliance. Now, the cost of reparation may be great, but I say, hey, you've been doing it for hundreds of years for Native Americans, and we're still paying it to this day. So even though the cost of reparations may be great, but a debt is owed and must be paid. A debt is owed and must be paid. It's kind of like if you went out and took out a loan to buy a house or a car, that bank, that lender, they want their money. Or if someone comes and cuts your grass or does something to your home, they did the labor, they did the service, and what if they would die? Their family is coming to get that money, are they not? So it's essentially our ancestors who are our family did the work. We want what's owed to us. You know what? How about this? Give us reparations so we don't have a damn excuse if we fail. Give us reparations the way we want reparations, the way you took reparations. You took our land. You divided us by redlining, homestead. You burned down our cities. That we created all the different types of Black Wall Street, because there was all types of Black Wall Streets throughout the nation. One in Richmond, one in Fayetteville, of course, Tulsa, Oklahoma. There was another one in Oklahoma. There were more than 7 Black Wall Streets, but the only one that gets notoriety, the only one gets publicity is Tulsa, Oklahoma, and that's mainly because this is the first time in American history that domestically a city was bombed from the sky. That's why it gets that much notoriety. Now, the moral claim for reparations at least equals that of any other government program. Now, I don't want to speak about the Jews, because the Jews not only got their reparations or getting their reparations from Nazi Germany, well, excuse me, not Nazi Germany today, but Germany, but they're still getting reparations from the American government. As I said before, Barack Obama and Joe Biden gave the Holocaust survivors who came to America reparations in an earmark of $12 million. So when they said they're not going to do nothing for one particular group, why is it that I keep saying one particular group get reparations of some form? I mean, we have to understand, folks, that America is a rich country. And if the will exists, the money can be found. And since we live in a system of fiat, that's a system of debt. The dollar is not backed by gold anymore. It's backed by debt. Guess what? They just print money anyway. Who cares? Who cares about the national debt? 25 trillion, 27 trillion. Who cares? They just print money. It don't matter. It's not backed by anything. It's backed by debt. That's why eventually I believe inflation will rise and the deflation of the value of the dollar will deflate. That's what I believe, because one thing in currency, you need a scarcity. And if there's no scarcity and you can just print money how much you want and when you want, then this is the same way Rome fell. Just printing money. Just as, decide how much is due in reparations. We're still trying to figure that out. I mean, a lot of us, the number I have in my head is $325,000. Do I believe they're going to give that to each and every 40 million foundational Black Americans? Absolutely not. But I'll take 100,000. I'll take 100,000 out the door. But that doesn't stop there. As I said, we need resources and funding and grants, no loans. See, I read the contract with Black America that Ice Cube made. Ice Cube, take that damn loan out of there. Grant, okay, stipend. That's what the words we're looking for. But maybe it's too early to agree on how reparation is to be given out. Fair methods can be worked out once society acknowledges the obligation to provide reparation in the first place. I mean, think about it. After the passage of the 13th Amendment following the Civil War, should our ancestors be granted reparations? They should have. How reparations for Black slavery is similar and different from the following. Think about it like this. Reparations was paid by the U.S. government to the Sacs Indians for lands illegally confiscated in 1877. Reparations were paid by West Germany to Jew survivors of the Nazi concentration camps. Reparations were paid by the U.S. government to the Japanese American internment unconstitutionally in prison camps during World War II. But those forms of reparation did not last as long as slavery in America. Most of those reparations were paid in a 3-year period where slavery was hundreds of years. Think about that. Let me read some of you guys' notes before I get out of here. We got Kiki Bryan. She said reparations are due to all descendants of slaves. Now, Kiki, I'm only speaking on foundational Black Americans. Now, if people from other countries, if their ancestors endured slavery, they need to protest to the country that they were enslaved. But for foundational Black Americans, our fight is with the U.S. government. D. Nice says, do you think every person of color will get them? I don't know what people of color means, D. Nice. I have no idea. I am talking about foundational Black Americans, because when you look at it, Asians supposedly are yellow. Hispanics are supposedly brown. Melanated people, Nubian people from Africa, we're supposedly Black. And those people who came out the Caucasus Mountains supposedly are white. We are all people of color. That's what people keep forgetting. When they say people of color and you say you got white people, brown people, and yellow people, those are all colors. So I am specifically talking about American descendant of slaves, melanated, Afrinated people from Africa. Those descendants who came over here either by choice before 1526, during 1526, and also 1619. That is what I'm referring to. I'm not talking about any other people of color, no other group, no one from Africa, essentially in modern day times, no people from Caribbean. I'm talking about those people who were around during 1890 census record, who were the direct descendant of slaves, and we are the direct descendant of those people. That is what I'm talking about. Kiki Bryan says, my grandmother picked cotton for free. They owe my family reparations for years of free labor, and their oppression was still afflicted by the daily living in the unjust racist country. Okay, I concur. She also says, so what they need to give us, all the welfare free money, food, medical, nah. I don't like the word welfare. I'm going to be a stickler on the word welfare. No, give us what you owe us. And see, when we start using words like welfare and free, that is when all of society started to stick out their tongue. Oh, you guys just want handouts. No, 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 no. It's about give us what you owe. Give us what you took. Give us what you prevented us to do. They prevented us from starting businesses. They stole our patents when we created inventions. Give us what you owe. It's not about free welfare and food, medical. No, no, no. We want resources. We want funding. We want monetary direct payments. We want you to give us what you owe. Not welfare, ain't nothing free. Do you hear them talking about Native Americans getting welfare? No. Do you see Native Americans talking about getting anything free? No. They're giving Native Americans what they owe Native Americans. So my fight is never against Native Americans, even though I do a lot of compare and contrast. I believe, they're getting essentially what the U.S. government is giving them. They're getting their form of reparations each and every year. See, that's the thing. They believe that when they give us reparation, that it should stop. Like, okay, we're going to give you one big check for medical care. We're going to give you one big check for land. We're going to give you one big check, an individual payment. We're going to give you one big check for food. No, 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 no. Each and every year, the U.S. government forks out over $2 billion to fund and support Native American tribes and reservations. Think about that. How reservations of sovereign land, which are considered their own country, how do they have the police departments? How is that being funded? Where the people on reservations, essentially, most of them don't work. Some of them do work, but most of them don't work. How's that happening? Federal government. Now, D Nice says, how much is $100,000 per each black person? D Nice, calculator, man. Do the math on that. And then D Nice says the platinum plan. Man, get the hell out of here. The platinum plan. Stop it. See, you got some trolls in here. Let me stop reading some of these damn notes. I'm sorry, family. Let's see what else. Now, this is the most powerful thing Kiki said today. Reparations cut the check. Thank you very much. We got Legs in the room. Good morning from Alaska. Let's see what D Nice is talking about. They still trolling. It says, why did the United States give the Jewish reparation if they had nothing to do with it? Exactly. Very good question. Very good question. Why is the government paying reparations to a group that had nothing to do with the oppression of that group, but had everything to do with the liberation of that group? D Nice says they're not a troll. Okay, we'll see. Kiki Bryan says that the government bombed so many of our towns, they're afraid we'll overpower them. They give us reparation. They know we're the greatest people upon the earth. We built the entire Western country. I disagree. Even if you give foundational Black Americans reparations, I think the government still know that we won't go to war with them, that we won't fight, that we won't topple the country. You know why? First of all, a lot of us are in a fairy tale. A lot of us do not believe that we are prisoners of war. They don't believe that there's a race war going on. That's the issue. A lot of us think everything is this hunky-dory and that a few bad police officers and a few bad race soldiers and white supremacists around the country are killing Black people. No, we are in a total race war. We are prisoners of war. See, when I went to Jamaica, the first thing I felt like Mel Gibson in Braveheart. Freedom! That's how I felt. Where everywhere I went, I saw a Black person, and I didn't feel like I was being judged. I didn't feel like I was being profiled. I didn't feel none of those things. I saw a reflection in the mirror. I even felt that when I went to the Dominican Republic. Now, of course, each country got coons. They got people in support of white supremacy, but you can't stop that. But I can tell you, in melanated countries, you'll feel less threatened. You will feel less threatened. That's just my opinion from my experience. So when you say that you believe that they will topple us, listen, unfortunately, Black Americans, most of us don't have legal firearms. Most of us don't even have firearms, let alone how to shoot and fire those firearms accurately. While white supremacists, they're in shooting ranges, they're in their backyards, they're in the countryside with AR-15s, handguns, some got rocket launchers, grenades, claymore mines. They are ready for war. They have a set up supply system, if they were to go to war, of how they will give food, water, and ammunition to their front line of troops. This is white supremacy. They're ready for war. Black Americans, we're not ready for war. We're ready for a fight. We're good with the hands. We're physically strong, but this won't be a fist fight. This will be an actual war, gunfight, casualties. Do we have enough people, medical doctors, if we were to get into a gunfight and one of us got wounded, that they can actually extract the bullet and then sew up the wound? Do we have that? Yeah, we have a bunch of nurses. We have that in the Black community, but do we have a bunch of doctors? Do we have a lot of people who are in logistics that can widespread across the country? And we have built up systems to supply ourselves if we get into a race war. And ladies and gentlemen, don't get me wrong. When I mean race war, that means that all the Black people are not going against all the white people and those support of white people. No. We're talking about white supremacists. We're talking about those who go about oppressing us simply because of the color of our sin and our ancestry and our lineage. That's what I'm talking about. Thank you. That's what I'm talking about. So, ladies and gentlemen, this is not about war. Even though we're in a race war and we're prisoners of war, we're not ready for actual war. Yeah, we can get on the internet and we can knock out a white supremacist. We can knock out a Karen. We can knock out a Brad or a Todd when they say the N-word to us or bump us or attack one of our women or men. We can go to battle. We can go to a fight and beat their asses. But when it comes to a true race war, you're going to have white people who will be on the sidelines who are not a part of that mess. I'm not a white supremacist, but I'm not going to help either. Then you're going to have Black people, whether they're from America or another country. They're like, I'm not getting involved in that. I got family. I got kids. So that diminishes our numbers. We're already the third minority on the list. Whites, browns, Blacks, then yellows. So if I really say it, Caucasian, foundational Black Americans, Caucasian, Hispanics, foundational Black Americans, and Asians. That's the way it is. So when you look at this, I am not giving any inspiration or motivation to go out and start a war. Because the fact of the matter is we're in a war. Don't you see melanated people dying every day by the hand of white supremacists and race soldiers? I do. Do you see us going out or like the not fucking around coalition? You see them reacting or responding to these race soldiers and white supremacists? No. They didn't march in North Carolina with all Black on with guns, and that's just a show of force. But we're still getting killed in the street each and every day. And you don't see not one group stand up and say, we're going to war, because we know we lack the infrastructure, we lack the intelligence, we lack the methods and the strategies to go to war. And then who do we go to war against? We're going to go in the backwoods of Arkansas and Alabama? See, this is a war that they're attacking us on all fronts. Economically, medically. They're attacking us on all fronts. So D Nice says they're dying by Pookie and Ray Ray also. There we go, changing the perspective of Black on Black crime. You know what's funny is I hate when white, Black, and whoever talks about Black on Black crime, but I say, well, what about white on white crime? What about the white lady who killed her 3 kids because she said that the father essentially was molesting them. But the father came out and said, well, you know, I have this report that I did a month ago that my wife needed mental health, but she killed the 3 kids. What about all the mass shootings? See, that's what people don't understand. If Pookie and Ray Ray killed themselves in the hood, then Pookie and Ray Ray is dead. But no one talks about all the mass shootings that occur by 99% of the time are white people. No one talks about that. Or what about black on black crime? What about white on mass shootings? What about that? So D Nice, you continue to prove yourself as a somewhat troll, or maybe you're just uninformed. But here's the thing. When you guys get in these chat rooms and I'm calling y'all as trolls and you feeling offended, that's because you're asking dumbass questions. We keep changing the narrative from everybody else except for us. We're not in the situation. We're not in the predicament because of ourselves. We had 100% support. The reason why foundational Black Americans are the bottom class economically in this country. Not only are we the bottom class economically, but we are also looked at as the criminal class in America. How you think mass incarceration happened? See, reparations is just not a direct payment, but it's also justice. I mean, forget equality. Let's just get justice. If a white boy and a black dude going to a corner store, they both rob it. None of them have records. Both of them have firearms. Can we get the same time? But sometimes the reason why we don't get justice, sometimes is because we're black. Sometimes it's because we don't have the money to actually afford our own defense, our own lawyer. And sometimes it's just both. Sometimes, more likely, more times than not, it's both. Because that's the thing. When they commit crime, they have resources in order to get the money. They have houses where they can borrow against their house, take the equity off their house. Most of us don't have houses. Most of us live in apartments and projects. So when we talk about reparations, ladies and gentlemen, it's just not a big fat check. No. It's about justice too. The same thing that you tore down and burned down and took from us, we want you to help build up and actually fund. What if we wanted reparations just like the Native Americans? You know what? Give the Black community $2 billion. Well, let's do it by the numbers. Give us $10 billion every year as a Black community to fund our community centers, to fund our neighborhoods, fix up our parks, our community centers, our clinics, fund all of it, just like the way you do the Native Americans. What if that? People were being outraged. But again, I say, well, why don't you guys protest against the Native Americans? See, I want to know what's harder, taking someone's land or building the infrastructure of the country on that land. Who you think work harder? Now, again, this commentary is not against Native Americans. I'm just making a point. If I come and steal your land, you never built anything on it. The most you did was farm on it. But if I bring in another group and they literally build every structure, they picked the cotton, they picked the tobacco, they cultivated the sugar, so on and so forth, and literally built the country's wealth, who's really deserving of reparations? But I won't get into that because you took their land. I believe Native Americans do deserve reparations. And they continue. I mean, they got their reparations. They continue to get it each and every year. But this is about us. Stop making us the villain. Stop making us the villain. We keep looking to ourselves as the problem. Yes, Are there some things that we can do to help our community, to help fix our community? Yes, it is. But if you guys believe that the Black community can pull themselves up by their bootstraps and somehow accumulate wealth and generational wealth, that's a lie. That won't occur. Not each and every Black man and Black woman will become aware enough, become woke enough, become educated enough, become experienced enough for this to happen. We're still living with trauma. Majority of us Black men, we grew up without a father. Some people, again, they look at the present problem. I look at the why. I look at the Park Service. A lot of people didn't know this, but the Park Service was the first slave catchers. And then the Park Service became policemen. And then that branched out to all these other different law enforcement agencies. If you notice that majority of fathers, Black fathers, were in the home prior to the 70s. What happened in the 70s and 80s? Oh, one of the three-letter agencies introduced crack cocaine. What also happened in the 70s and 80s? Oh, the three-strike rule, anti-crime, anti-drug bill. Then the 1994 crime bill came, but the was it 86, 84, 86? The anti-drug bill came, and also the three-strike rule. And with over-policing, with racially profiling, most of our fathers were incarcerated because of this. Mitchell Liggins said, excuse me, thanks for clearing up the Pookie and Ray Ray myth. When the Mexican cartel slaughtered their people and others, we never hear about people tell Mexicans to get their people straight. They ask the government. Exactly. And this is what I'm talking about, proximity killings. Mexicans kill Mexicans, Hispanics kill Hispanics, whites killed white. But a lot of us, you know what? A lot of us Black people in America, we're watching too much damn CNN and MSNBC and Fox News. You really need to start to listen to news to people who speak on your own special interests. If they're not speaking for Black people, and they're not trying to undermine Black people and change the argument and switch the argument, do this bait and switch. On one hand, they're saying, oh, yeah, you right. On one hand, they're saying, yeah, you right. And then on the other hand, they say, well, I seen Pookie shoot a 7-year-old 6 times yesterday on the news. But they never bring up mass shootings. You get the middle finger, sir. You get the middle finger. This is Financial Literacy 101. You was live with Ross. And this is the fight and consisting on the backs of white supremacists for reparations now. Give us what you owe.